The richest man on that yacht heard applause, but the waitress heard the sound that would save his daughter. Ethan Whitmore stood beneath a canopy of warm deck lights, his ivory blazer glowing against the black water of Biscayne Bay. Around him, champagne glasses lifted like small crystal trophies. Investors smiled. Cameras flashed. A jazz trio played near the stern, soft enough to sound expensive and loud enough to cover anything ordinary. Ethan raised his glass with the calm confidence of a man who owned the boat beneath his feet, the company being celebrated, and nearly every conversation happening around him. "To the future," he said, and the crowd answered with cheers. 20 feet away, Clara Bennett moved through the party with a silver tray balanced on one hand and a quiet focus in her pale blue eyes. Her white waitress shirt was crisp, her black vest plain, and her blonde hair was tied back with a wine-red ribbon that had begun to loosen in the ocean wind. No one looked at her for more than a second. Not really. They saw the tray, the champagne, the uniform. They did not see the way her gaze checked every doorway, every stairwell, every careless hand reaching too fast for a glass. Clara was used to being invisible. Sometimes invisibility made a person notice more. She passed a table of laughing guests near the port side when the sound came. Small, thin, almost swallowed by music and waves. Clara stopped. The tray trembled once, barely enough to disturb the bubbles in the glasses. She turned her head toward the service stairs leading below deck. At first, there was only the low hum of the yacht's engines and the soft slap of water against the hull. Then it came again, a child crying. Not loud, not dramatic, the kind of cry that had already spent too much breath trying to be heard. Clara's fingers tightened around the tray. She looked across the deck. Near Ethan's table, a small pink sweater lay folded over the back of an empty chair. Beside it sat a coloring book open to a page of blue whales. The seat was empty. Clara had seen the little girl earlier, Lily Whitmore, 6 years old, with bright eyes and a shy smile, staying close to her father until the party grew too crowded. Now Ethan was laughing with a senator. A woman in pearls was touching his sleeve. His Swiss watch caught the light as he lifted his glass again. Clara stepped toward the stairwell. A crew member in a navy jacket moved in front of her. "Staff storage is the other way," he said. Clara kept her voice low. "I heard a child below." He smiled without warmth. "Impossible. Guests aren't allowed down there." From beneath their feet came a faint thump. Once, twice, then a broken whisper through the metal. "Daddy." Clara's face changed, but her voice did not rise. "Then someone should tell the child she's impossible." The crew member glanced toward the party, annoyed now, afraid of the wrong thing. "Miss, do not create a scene." Clara slowly lowered the champagne tray onto a side table. Glass touched glass with a delicate sound. On the deck above, Ethan Whitmore began another toast. Below, his daughter cried again, softer this time. Clara did not move toward the storage corridor. She moved toward the stairs. The crew member stepped closer, lowering his voice as if volume could turn truth into inconvenience. "You are new here, are you not?" he asked. "Temporary catering staff?" Clara looked past his shoulder to the dark stairwell. "There is a little girl down there. There are no guests below deck during a private event. Then there should not be a pink whale hair clip on the third step." His expression tightened. Clara saw it. Not shock, not concern, calculation. That frightened her more than anger would have. Behind them, the crowd laughed at something Ethan had said. The sound rolled across the deck like warm air from another world. Clara picked up the small hair clip from the stair, its plastic edge wet with a single drop of water. She had seen Lily wearing it less than an hour earlier, when the child had asked for apple juice and a champagne flute, because she wanted to look grown up beside her father. Clara had smiled then. Ethan had barely looked away from his phone. Now the clip lay in Clara's palm like a quiet warning. She turned and walked straight toward the center of the party. The crew member followed quickly. "Miss Bennett," he hissed, reading her name tag for the first time. "This is not your place." Clara kept walking. A child is everyone's place. Ethan Whitmore was finishing his toast when she reached him. His ivory blazer was spotless. His smile was practiced. The people around him stood in a half circle, waiting for the kind of words powerful men used to make profit sound noble. Clara stopped at the edge of that circle, holding the pink hair clip in her hand. No one moved aside for her. So she waited. Not timidly, not rudely. Simply waited until silence noticed her. Ethan lowered his glass. "Can I help you?" His tone was polite enough for witnesses and cold enough for staff. Clara held up the clip. "Where is your daughter, sir?" A small ripple passed through the guests. Ethan blinked once, annoyed by the interruption. "With her nanny. I saw her chair empty. I heard her crying below deck." The senator beside him gave a thin laugh. "Below deck? On this yacht? That sounds unlikely." Clara did not look at the senator. Children do not cry according to what sounds likely. Ethan's jaw tightened. "My daughter is safe. I pay people very well to make sure of that. Then one of those people should answer where she is." The words landed softly, but the deck seemed to lose a little air. Ethan glanced toward the table where Lily's sweater still hung over the chair. For the first time that evening, his smile failed. "Margot?" he called, looking around for the nanny. No answer. The jazz kept playing. The water kept striking the hull. Then, from the open stairwell behind Clara, faint but unmistakable, came one more cry. "Daddy, I am scared." Ethan's champagne glass stopped halfway to the table. Clara watched his face change. The millionaire disappeared. The father remained. Ethan moved first, but Clara moved faster. Not because she was stronger, not because she had authority, because she already knew where fear was coming from. She turned toward the stairwell and took the steps down 2 at a time, one hand sliding along the polished rail as the warm music from above faded behind her. Ethan followed, his dress shoes hitting the metal stairs too hard, too unevenly. Behind him came the crew member, the catering manager, and 3 guests who suddenly remembered how to be concerned when concern had witnesses. The air changed halfway down. It lost the scent of champagne and perfume. It became colder, damp, mechanical. The walls narrowed into a corridor lit by thin white strips that flickered with every low vibration of the engines. Clara stopped at the bottom step and listened. Everyone else was breathing too loudly. "Quiet," she said. The word was not loud, but it cut through them. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. A soft tapping came from the left. 3 small knocks. Then a weak voice. "Please." Ethan's face went pale. "Lily." He rushed toward the sound, but Clara caught his sleeve. "Slowly. If the floor is wet, running can make you fall." He stared at her hand on his blazer as if no waitress had ever stopped him before. Then he looked down. A thin sheet of water was spreading across the corridor, shining under the emergency lights. One door at the far end had a red label that read life jacket storage. The handle did not move when Ethan grabbed it. He pulled harder. "Nothing. Open it." He snapped at the crew member. The man swallowed. "That compartment should not be locked." Clara looked at him. "But it is." Ethan pounded once on the door with the side of his fist, then pressed his palm flat against it. "Lily, sweetheart, I am here. Daddy is here." From inside came a small sob. "It is cold." Clara knelt near the base of the door. Water seeped out beneath it in steady threads. She touched it with 2 fingers. Cold, but not deep yet. Not too late. Her eyes moved across the frame, the hinges, the latch, the emergency release panel half hidden behind a mounted fire blanket. "Do you have a key?" she asked. The crew member looked toward the manager instead of answering. Clara did not wait. She pulled the small service corkscrew from her apron pocket, unfolded the flat edge, and slid it beneath the plastic cover of the release panel. "You cannot do that," the manager said. Clara kept working. "Watch me carefully, then." The cover popped loose and clattered to the wet floor. A red manual lever sat inside. Clara pulled it. The door clicked, but only opened 2 inches before stopping against something heavy inside. Lily cried out. Ethan pushed forward, panic breaking through his polished voice. Clara held up one hand. "Do not force it. You may push whatever is blocking her." The corridor went still. Above them, the party music continued faintly, cheerful and wrong. Clara lowered herself to the floor, turned sideways, and looked through the gap. In the dim compartment, she saw yellow life jackets, a tipped storage bin, and Lily's small hand gripping the edge of a shelf. Clara softened her voice until it barely sounded like the same woman. "Lily, my name is Clara. I brought you apple juice earlier. Can you hear me?" A tiny nod moved in the dark. "Good. Keep looking at my voice." Ethan bent beside her, helpless in his $1,000 blazer. "Can you get her out?" Clara looked at the rising water, then at the blocked door, then at the little girl trying not to cry. "Yes," she said, not because she was certain, because Lily needed someone to be. Clara reached through the narrow opening first, not with force, but with patience. Her shoulder pressed against the cold metal frame. Water soaked the sleeve of her white shirt, then her vest, then the wine-red ribbon that had slipped loose against her neck. "Lily," she said, steady and close. "I need you to tell me what is touching your foot." The little girl sniffed. "A box. It fell. I cannot move." Ethan lowered himself beside Clara, his polished shoes planted in the thin water, his face only inches from the gap. "Baby, Daddy is right here." Lily tried to answer, but the words broke into a shiver. Clara looked at him once. Not unkindly. Not softly either. "Keep talking to her." Calm voice. "No promises you cannot control." Ethan swallowed. He was a man who had promised impossible things in boardrooms and made them happen by morning. But here, in a wet corridor beneath his own yacht, he could not promise a door would open. He could only speak. "Lily, remember the blue whale you drew?" he said, his voice trembling at the edges. "The one with the tiny gold crown." A small sound came from inside. Almost a laugh, almost a sob. It was not tiny. You are right. It was very royal. Clara slid her hand farther through the gap, feeling along the floor. A plastic bin had tipped sideways, wedging itself between the door and a metal rack. Beyond it, something soft. Lily's sneaker. Clara stopped immediately. "I found the box," she said. "I am not going to pull you. I am going to move what is blocking the door." The crew member hovered behind them, pale under the emergency lights. The catering manager whispered into a radio that gave back only static. Above, the jazz music finally stopped. The silence from the deck seemed heavier than the music had been. People were listening now. Too late to be innocent. Clara turned her head toward the crew member. "Get towels. Dry ones. And a blanket. Now." He hesitated. Ethan looked up, and for the first time that night his money had no charm in it, only command. "Do what she said." The man ran. Clara took a slow breath, braced one hand against the door frame, and used the corkscrew handle to hook the edge of the plastic bin. 1 inch. Then another. The door opened a little wider. Lily whimpered as the bin shifted. Clara froze. "Did that hurt?" "No," Lily whispered. "It scared me." "That is allowed," Clara said. "Being scared means your body is trying to keep you safe." Ethan looked at her as if hearing a language he should have learned years ago. Clara reached again, this time with both hands, and pushed the bin away from Lily's shoe. The door gave another 4 inches. Enough for Clara to see the compartment clearly. Life jackets floated against the wall. A cracked service pipe sprayed a thin stream of water near the floor drain, which had been blocked by a folded tarp. Not disaster yet, but it had been becoming one while everyone upstairs celebrated. Clara slipped through the widened gap before anyone could stop her. "Clara," Ethan said, startled. "Stay there," she answered. "If you come in too fast, you will frighten her and block the door." Inside, the compartment was colder. Lily sat on a low shelf, knees drawn close, cheeks wet, one sneaker trapped beneath the corner of the tipped bin. Clara crouched in the water and smiled gently. "Hi, Lily." The child stared at the soaked waitress with wide eyes. "You heard me?" Clara nodded. "Yes." Lily's lips trembled. Nobody else did. Clara's smile faded into something quieter. "I know." She lifted the bin just enough for Lily to slide her foot free. No struggle, no drama, just careful hands, steady breath, and a little girl moving towards safety inch by inch. When Clara wrapped Lily in her arms, Ethan pressed one hand over his mouth outside the door. His Swiss watch dripped water onto the floor, ticking as if it had only just learned what time meant. Clara guided Lily toward the gap with one arm around the child's shoulders and the other hand braced against the metal rack. "Look at me, not the water," she whispered. Lily nodded, but her small fingers clutched Clara's vest as if letting go might make the dark room swallow her again. Outside the door, Ethan reached forward, then stopped himself. For once, he waited to be told what to do. Clara noticed. "Take her hands when I lift her," she said. Slowly, Ethan knelt lower, his ivory blazer dipping into the water without him caring. Clara lifted Lily through the opening inch by inch. The little girl slipped into her father's arms, cold and shaking, but safe. Ethan held her so tightly that his eyes closed. No speech, no command, no performance, just breath breaking against his daughter's damp hair. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." Lily did not answer at first. She only pressed her face into his shoulder. Then she lifted one trembling hand and pointed toward Clara. "She came when I called." The words were small. They filled the corridor. Ethan opened his eyes. Clara was still inside the compartment, pushing the tarp away from the blocked drain with her foot. The water began to pull downward in a slow spiral. She reached for the cracked pipe valve, twisted it with both hands, and the spray softened to a drip. When she stepped back through the gap, her uniform was soaked, her hair ribboned dark with water, her hands red from the cold. The crew member returned with towels and a blanket. Too late, but carrying them like proof of usefulness. Clara took the blanket and wrapped it around Lily before anyone else touched it. "Keep her warm," she said. "Small sips of water when she is ready. No crowding." Ethan nodded like a student. The catering manager tried to speak. "Mr. Whitmore, we should move this upstairs quietly. The guests are concerned, but there is no need to alarm anyone further." Clara looked at him. A locked child in a flooding compartment is not an inconvenience. The manager flushed. "You do not understand event protocol." Ethan slowly turned his head. "Neither do you, apparently." The corridor went silent again. "Not frightened." Corrected. Clara crouched near the latch and studied the door. There was a scratch across the outer plate, fresh and bright under the emergency light. The manual release cover had not been stuck from age. It had been secured with a small strip of clear tape, almost invisible unless someone was close enough to look. Clara peeled it from the edge and held it up. This was not an accident. The crew member's face changed. The manager looked away too quickly. Ethan saw both reactions. His arms tightened around Lily, but his voice came out controlled and low. "Explain." No one answered. Above them, footsteps gathered at the stairwell. Guests whispered. Phones were lowered. The world of champagne and polished smiles had come down to the wet corridor at last. Clara placed the strip of tape and the broken panel cover on a folded towel, as carefully as if setting evidence on a courtroom table. Then she looked at Ethan, not as a waitress begging to be believed, but as the only person who had been right from the beginning. "Someone cared more about your party staying perfect than your daughter being found." Ethan looked down at Lily, wrapped in Clara's blanket, and something inside him settled into shame. He had bought the yacht. He had hired the staff. He had trusted the image of safety more than the sound of his own child. When he looked back at Clara, his voice was quieter than the water dripping from his sleeves. "What do you need?" Clara answered without hesitation. "A doctor for Lily." The Coast Guard notified, and everyone upstairs told the truth. Ethan did not argue. He turned toward the catering manager with Lily still wrapped against his chest. "Call the Coast Guard. Then call a pediatric doctor and have one waiting at the marina." The manager opened his mouth, perhaps to soften the order, perhaps to protect the evening, but Ethan's eyes stopped him. "Now." The word traveled farther than a shout. Within seconds, radios crackled. Footsteps hurried. The yacht that had floated like a palace began to sound like a workplace again. Clara stood beside the open compartment, arms folded close to keep from shaking. Cold water dripped from her sleeves onto the floor. She watched the crew move around her as if they had only now discovered urgency. Lily peeked over her father's shoulder. "Is Clara coming upstairs too?" Ethan looked at the soaked waitress. "Of course she is." Clara shook her head. "Take Lily first." "You are freezing." "She is 6. That ended the discussion. Ethan carried his daughter up the narrow stairwell, slower this time, careful with every step. Clara followed behind them, one hand on the rail, the other holding the folded towel with the tape, the broken panel cover, and the loosened piece of latch hardware. When they reached the deck, the party had changed shape. No one laughed. No one lifted a glass. The jazz musicians stood silent beside their instruments. Guests who had spent the evening measuring each other by watches, dresses, and stock options now stared at a little girl wrapped in a plain service blanket. Lily's wet hair clung to her cheeks. Her father's ivory blazer was stained with seawater. And Clara, the waitress they had barely noticed, stepped into the deck lights carrying the truth in both hands. A woman in pearls whispered, "What happened?" Ethan looked at the crowd. For a moment, habit almost returned. The old instinct to manage the room. Protect the brand. Control the story. Then Lily's fingers tightened around his collar. He looked down at her, and the truth became simple. "My daughter was trapped below deck," he said. Miss Bennett heard her when no one else did. The crowd shifted. Some faces softened. Others turned away, ashamed of how recently they had smiled. The senator who had laughed earlier lowered his eyes. Clara did not look at him. She was watching the crew member near the stairs. He had gone pale, his gaze locked on the towel in her hands. Ethan noticed. So did Clara. The captain arrived from the bridge, a man with silver hair and a crisp white uniform. Mr. Whitmore, I assure you we are investigating a mechanical issue. Clara placed the towel on the nearest cocktail table. The clear tape glistened under the lights. The broken panel cover sat beside it. The latch piece rolled once, then stopped against the base of a champagne flute. Mechanical issues do not tape emergency releases shut, Clara said. No anger. No drama. Just the sentence. Clean and impossible to ignore. The captain's mouth tightened. The catering manager stared at the deck. Ethan looked from one man to the other and understood what money had hidden from him. Not a grand conspiracy. Not some cinematic villain. Something smaller. Worse. Neglect dressed as professionalism. Fear dressed as protocol. People protecting an event instead of a child. Lily lifted her head. Daddy, I called and called. Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. I know. His voice broke softly. I should have heard you. Clara stepped back, giving father and daughter the space no spotlight should enter. But Lily reached for her. One small hand from inside the blanket. Clara hesitated, then took it. The deck lights reflected off the water around them, bright and trembling. And for the first time that night, every powerful person aboard the Ivory Star was silent enough to listen. The Coast Guard boat arrived as a white flash against the dark water, its blue lights sweeping softly across the side of the Ivory Star. No sirens. No panic. Just the steady arrival of people trained to treat emergencies as facts, not embarrassments. Lily was checked first. A medic wrapped a warmer blanket around her shoulders, listened to her breathing, and asked gentle questions about her fingers, her foot, and whether anything hurt. She answered in a small voice, still holding Clara's hand. Ethan stood close, but not too close. He had learned something in the last 15 minutes. Love could crowd a frightened child when it was mixed with guilt. So he waited where Lily could see him. Clara stood barefoot now, her wet shoes set aside near a deck chair, a dry towel around her shoulders. The wine-red ribbon was still in her hair, darker than before, almost the color of the bay under the lights. One of the medics looked at her hands and asked if she needed to be examined. Clara shook her head. After Lily. The medic did not argue. Some answers revealed a person completely. Near the bar, the captain spoke quietly with a Coast Guard officer. The catering manager kept glancing at Ethan, hoping for rescue from consequences. None came. Ethan watched as the officer lifted the strip of clear tape with gloved fingers, then photographed the emergency panel cover and the latch piece Clara had saved. Every small thing she had noticed now mattered. Every detail the others had dismissed had become evidence. Miss Bennett, the officer said, turning to her. How did you know where to look? Clara's eyes moved to the stairwell. For a moment, the deck lights blurred into another night. Not Miami. Not this yacht. A smaller boat off the coast of Maine. A summer storm that came faster than anyone expected. Her little brother, Noah, laughing below deck with a toy flashlight. Adults talking over thunder. Then a sound she had mentioned for years and had never forgotten. A child crying beneath noise everyone called normal. Clara blinked, and the yacht returned. Ethan was watching her now, but she did not perform pain for him. She simply answered, I know what a child sounds like when they are trying not to use all their breath. The officer's expression softened. Ethan's face changed in a different way. He heard the sentence beneath the sentence. Lily did too, somehow. She leaned against Clara's side. Did you save another kid before? Clara looked down at her. The question was innocent. The answer was not simple. I tried to, Clara said. That was all. Enough. Ethan lowered his eyes. The powerful people on the deck had spent the evening discussing risk, insurance, acquisitions, losses. None of them had understood loss the way Clara carried it. Quietly, without decoration, without asking anyone to make room for it. A Coast Guard officer approached Ethan and spoke in a low voice. The preliminary review was clear. The release cover had been deliberately sealed, likely to stop alarms from interrupting the event after a known leak triggered a maintenance warning. The captain claimed he had ordered only a temporary fix. The crew member claimed he had followed instructions. The manager claimed he had not understood the danger. Each sentence sounded smaller than the last. Ethan listened without moving. Then he looked at Lily, wrapped in a service blanket, her small hand still inside Clara's. Everyone who knew will answer for it, he said. His voice was calm now. Not polished. Not public. Clara turned slightly, expecting another promise from a rich man trying to buy back peace. But Ethan surprised her. He did not offer money. He did not offer a job. He said, "Thank you for hearing what I missed." Clara held his gaze for one quiet second. "Next time," she said, "do not make the quietest voice prove itself first." The words struck him harder than blame, because they were not cruel. They were true. By the time the Ivory Star returned to the marina, the night had lost its shine. The skyline still glittered across Biscayne Bay, but no one spoke about the view. Guests stepped off the yacht more quietly than they had boarded it, their designer shoes touching the dock as if the wood itself demanded humility. Reporters had gathered near the gate, drawn by Coast Guard lights and whispers moving faster than official statements. Ethan carried Lily down the gangway himself. He did not hand her to an assistant. He did not let a security guard create distance between them. His ivory blazer was still damp, his hair windblown, his watch silent on his wrist. Lily rested against him, tired but awake, one hand wrapped around the edge of Clara's service blanket. Clara followed several steps behind, wrapped in a borrowed jacket that was too large for her shoulders. The wine-red ribbon in her hair had dried unevenly, leaving loose strands against her cheeks. A photographer raised a camera. Ethan turned slightly, shielding Lily from the flash without saying a word. Then he looked back at Clara. "Come with us to the clinic," he said. Clara shook her head. "She has you now." Lily lifted her head. "But I want Clara." The sentence stopped Ethan more completely than any command could have. Clara stepped closer and crouched so Lily did not have to look up. "You are going to be checked by a doctor. Your dad will stay with you the whole time. And tomorrow, you are going to draw the biggest whale in Florida." Lily studied her face. "With a crown?" "With a crown so big it needs its own ocean." A tiny smile appeared. Ethan watched it happen, humbled by how easily Clara reached a place in his daughter that wealth had never touched. Behind them, the catering manager was being questioned near the dock office. The captain stood apart, no longer crisp, no longer in control. The crew member kept his eyes on the ground. Consequences had arrived without shouting. That was the thing about truth. It did not need to be loud once it was visible. An assistant hurried toward Ethan with a phone. "Mr. Whitmore, the press is asking for a statement. The investors are waiting. Legal recommends we say there was a minor safety concern and that everyone is fine." Ethan looked at the phone, then at Lily's small fingers holding Clara's blanket. A minor safety concern. That was the language of people who had never sat outside a locked door listening to their child whisper through cold metal. He took the phone, ended the call, and handed it back. "Tell legal the truth is not a liability tonight." The assistant stared. Ethan turned to the reporters waiting beyond the gate. "My daughter is safe because a waitress listened when the rest of us were too distracted to notice. Her name is Clara Bennett. The failure was ours. The courage was hers." Clara looked down, uncomfortable beneath a tension that felt heavier than wet clothes. She had not done it for a headline. She had done it because a child had cried and someone had to answer. Ethan seemed to understand. He stepped out of the spotlight, leaving space around her instead of pushing her into it. Before he entered the waiting car, he faced her one more time. "I cannot undo what I missed," he said. "But I can make sure no child on anything I own is ever unheard again." Clara did not smile. Not fully. She only nodded, calm and tired and impossible to dismiss. "Start there," she said. The car door closed softly. Lily's hand lifted behind the glass, small and pale under the marina lights. Clara lifted hers back. Then she turned away from the cameras, walking down the dock as dawn began to silver the edge of the water. The story should have ended at the clinic, with Lily warm, safe, and asleep under a clean white blanket while her father sat beside her counting every breath as if it were a blessing he had almost lost. But quiet choices rarely end where the world stops watching. By sunrise, Ethan Whitmore had not gone home. He sat in a small consultation room in the Marina Medical Center, his damp ivory blazer folded across his knees, his silent Swiss watch resting on the table beside a paper cup of untouched coffee. Through the glass window, he could see Lily sleeping. Clara's service blanket was still tucked around her shoulders because Lily had refused to let anyone take it away. Ethan looked older in the morning light. Not weaker, more awake. His assistant entered with a tablet, ready with statements, investor calls, and reputation plans. Ethan listened for less than a minute. Then he said, "Cancel the celebration coverage." Release the safety report when the Coast Guard allows it. No polishing. No hiding. The assistant hesitated. That may damage the company. Ethan looked through the window at his daughter. Then let it damage the part that deserves it. Across town, Clara Bennett stepped into her small apartment just after 7 o'clock in the morning. Her shoes were still damp in a plastic bag. Her uniform clung cold to her skin. She removed the wine-red ribbon from her hair and placed it beside the sink with careful hands. For a long moment, she stood there in silence, listening to the ordinary hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the safe and simple sounds of a morning that had not taken anyone away. She did not cry. She had learned years ago that some grief did not leave through tears. It left through attention, through never ignoring a sound that seemed too small to matter. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. It was a photo. Lily, awake now, holding up a drawing of a blue whale wearing a crown large enough to cover the sun. Beneath it, in uneven letters, she had written, "Thank you for hearing me." Clara sat down slowly on the edge of a chair. The apartment blurred for one breath. Only one. Then she smiled, small and private. 3 days later, Ethan announced a new maritime safety foundation for children, not with a gala, but from the dock where the yacht had returned. He named Clara Bennett publicly, but when reporters asked if she considered herself a hero, Clara only looked toward the water. "No," she said. "I was close enough to listen." Ethan stood beside Lily, holding her hand instead of his phone. He finally understood that protection was not something a man purchased and forgot. It was something he practiced. Every hour, every room, every voice. And from that day on, whenever applause rose too loudly around him, he looked for the quietest person nearby, because the quiet ones were never truly ordinary. Sometimes, they were the only ones who could hear the truth before it was too late.